I'm quite delighted to that you have joined this exciting panel or a fireside chat today that we are going to have. My name is Anand. I'm part of the TIE Bangalore, the Indus Entrepreneurs Bangalore, where I'm on the board, and I'm also the current chairperson of the IoT Forum. So I'll take a few minutes to introduce the IoT Forum, under whose auspices we are doing the program today. So the IoT Forum is an initiative of TIE Bangalore. It was started in 2014, and we have the founder chairman Arvind Tiwari here. I'll speak about him a little later. So he is here to moderate the session. But 2014 is when we started to raise the IoT quotient in India. At that point of time, IoT was relatively new in terms of its proliferance and all-pervasive nature that it is today in the digitalization or digitalized world today. But today, IoT is central to almost everything in terms of the digital transformation that is really changing both personal and business life. So the IoT Forum has been at the forefront of this, enabling startups to be able to identify and innovate, find markets, find funding resources, investors, VCs, and so on and so forth, as also to find the interaction and also to be able to connect with the interaction with the B2B customer, the industries, the consumer industries, heavy industries, lifestyle industries, and so on, as well as with the generic life. So that's what we do in the IoT Forum. We organize a lot of events. This is one of the monthly events that you have. We have a couple of events every month. We also have flagship events, which are about once a quarter. We have the IoT Day on April 9th every year. We have the Industrial IoT Day. We have an Agri-Tech Day. And then we have the IoT Matrix, which happens once a year. That's our flagship event coming soon as we go on. We have SIGs, or special interest groups, because we have grown so much, about 10 special interest groups to cater to the different user segments as well as the technology segments. And deep tech is one of those horizontals which is fast emerging and contributing as an area which startups are getting involved in, and there are a lot of exciting things happening. So today's discussion on the quantum landscape is all about a part of the Deep Tech SIG initiative. So if you're interested, please join the IoT Forum. All of us here are volunteers, and we volunteer and we learn from each other. So that's the very quick introduction to the IoT Forum. I'll stop there. What we have today for you is a very exciting quantum landscape discussion. Our subject matter specialist today is Srimati Reena Dayal. Welcome to you, ma'am, and a warm welcome to all the, on behalf of all the participants here. I'll give a very brief introduction of Reena right now. Reena Dayal is an IICA certified board director, chairperson of the board for Quantum Ecosystems and Technology Council of India, QETCI. She is a technology leader and an innovation management expert. She is known for her work in establishing and scaling up innovation function within organizations and for catching new waves of technology to incubate new tech-oriented businesses. She is the founding chairperson of QETCI. So let me say a few words about QETCI right now. QETCI was established with a mission to accelerate the quantum ecosystem in India, with goals to act as a think tank and an enabling entity which will drive international collaborations to enable the best in quantum in India. QETCI is bringing in the various stakeholders, government, industry, academia, standards bodies, startups together to create a collaborative base for forward-looking initiatives and projects. In quantum, she is responsible for enabling a special full semester course on quantum at the IIT Roorkee and the IEEE Hyderabad. She has many other roles which she plays, but for lack of time, without taking too much time away, I will not go into all those areas. She is an author, innovator, and so on. She has an engineering degree from IIT Roorkee and is a Chevening Fellow for Science and Innovation Leadership Program from the said business school, University of Oxford. So welcome to you again, ma'am. Talking to Reena Dayal will be Arvind Tiwari. For those of you who have attended the many programs of IoT Forum, Arvind is synonymous with the IoT Forum, is the co-founder of the forum in 2014. So this is our 7th year running, and from a small beginning, it's grown to over 2,000 plus startups with multifold activities, and with the core purpose of raising the IoT quotient. So we do a number of activities here, and Arvind has been the chair driving this. He is now the chair emeritus of the IoT Forum, continuing to guide us into the next frontiers in this space. So without much ado, I'll hand over to Arvind now to conduct the fireside chat. Over to you, Arvind.
Thanks, Anand, and welcome, Reena. Very nice to have you here. For the audience, I would suggest that this is a deep topic. It's really deep because it goes into subatomic particles, but it's also very impactful. Just as a background, this was memory back. I'm a physics graduate from IIT Kanpur. And before I decided to do management, I was headed the path to quantum cosmology. So a lot of this stuff is part of what I have trained in, tensors and relativistic, the Big Bang and all that. So quantum is something which also has major effects. It's not just a subatomic particle. It actually controls a lot the way the world is. There are one or two interesting things I'll mention, then I'll get started with Reena. Quantum normally is associated with two things. One, it's very, very cool, because quantum coherence, the type of things you need in quantum behavior, don't require noise. Temperature is noise. If you're aware, the Kelvin degree, absolute zero minus 273. So typically it's something which is very cold. And second is typically something which is microscopic, nanoparticles. The whole idea of quantum phenomena is when you have a large object, a mega object, quantum behavior goes away. So you tend to work with very small scale, both in terms of temperature and physics. So quantum is difficult. But interestingly, and if we get time, though this may not have academic credence, it has not been tested. But when I started IoT Forum, one of the things I did was to research how nature senses things and how sensors from IoT can do. So the eye, we all are aware of eye. You may be surprised that a trained human eye, night hunter, late night can spot difference of about 10 to 20 photons. That is an amazingly sharp eyesight, very, very minute. CCD cameras also don't fight that. The most interesting was the sense of smell. Bears can smell their mate a kilometer away. Can you imagine the acute sensing abilities that nature has? And also the sense of touch. A trained painter or trained musician, because the finger has ridges, can slide his finger on a very smooth surface. He can sense nanocentimeters of difference. Amazing capabilities are there. The reason this is relevant, because quantum properties are used in natural processes. I had mentioned in my LinkedIn post, and if we get time, we will talk. There are two natural processes where quantum phenomena are used. I don't know how many of you are aware of the monarch butterfly. It's a group of things. It flies to South America from Russia, Siberia, and the Siberian Crane. There's a bunch which flies to India, 3,000, 5,000 kilometers. The navigation these things do across vast continents. How do they do it? And they do it across generations. There's a lot of research happening, and a lot of it has to do with the intuition that they sense magnetic flux because of quantum effects. The isotopes that they have in their beaks let them see magnetic flux, and that is normally very scalable. We'll come back to it later. Let's park that for those who think that quantum is too far away. It happens in real time. So Reena, why don't you talk about the QETCI and the different parts of the ecosystem in India, and then we will move to the next set of questions. For the audience, roughly, we will spend about 30 minutes talking, and then we will do some question answers. So you can put it in the chat box. We'll pick it up there. Veena, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think
Louder.
I have been in the corporate sector for a fair amount of time, 28 years, and then March this year I decided, and I've been associated with the quantum space in India for around 2.5 years. Earlier I was purely focused on skill development and workforce development, looking at the fact that we didn't have any courses here which were graduate level, undergrad level courses which were, can you hear me clearly?
We cannot hear you clearly.
I wonder what's the reason for that. I have a backup network. Let me see if I can switch to that. And if that makes any difference. Just a second.
Quantum effect IV cases.
Is this better?
Much better.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I was saying that, you know, I having been associated with quantum in India for 2.5 years or so, earlier I was more focused on helping create these courses at the undergrad and grad level, which will actually get people ready, you know, for the quantum workforce. And then I realized that you know, there is a lot to be done in India from a quantum ecosystem perspective. If you look at it from a complete end-to-end perspective, if you look at skill building, if you look at you know, the startup ecosystem, if you look at commercialization and, you know, preparing the end user industries. And so QETCI, Quantum Ecosystems Technology Council of India, I was happy, you know, lucky enough to find two other co-founders, Professor Arun Pati, who's a well-known name in the quantum space, and then Ramesh Ketharaju, who's you know, in Wells Fargo, he's a vice president. So the three of us got together and formulated this not-for-profit entity, which is membership based, you know, so people can become members. And intent is to get the government, the academia, the industry, startups, the funds, and, you know, everybody in the ecosystem together. What is the purpose? The purpose is to look at those areas which are weak areas and see how we can enable that. So today, for example, startups in quantum is a weak area for India. There are barely any startups. You can count them on your fingers. And then there are a lot of people who are aspiring to set up startups in this space. So how can we give the right guidance and direction for the areas which are, you know, easy, you know, low-hanging fruits which can be picked up. So, for example, in India, there is a lot of strong capability on the AI side, on the IoT side, and there is also strong capability generally in software and algorithms and so on and so forth. So keeping that in mind, I think there is a lot of opportunity there, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. The Quantum Ecosystems Technology Council of India was officially launched on July 26th in the presence of the Principal Scientific Advisor of India, Chairman of ISRO, and you know, Secretary Meity. And so there's a lot of interest in the government saying that, you know, we don't work directly with the government as QETCI, but they see this as a good entity which can act as a catalyst, and there is a, you know, a support from a distance kind of thing that is there from them. And we're also getting involved in some of the activities. You know, there's for getting ecosystem players together, the PS's office is working on a platform, and, you know, we sort of giving input so that we will be the users for that platform for quantum and some of the emerging tech areas. So that is on that side. Microsoft and Amazon have joined us as large voting founding members. They are people who are now have people on the governing board for QETCI, and TCS and Google have joined as observers. We have Bharat Fund, which is also has a member joined in as an observer. Joining as an observer means that, you know, they're going to see what we are doing for the next couple of months and eventually then move on to become members. In fact, Microsoft and Amazon also were observers earlier. They were deeply involved in some of the activities that we were starting off, and now they have become members. A lot of individuals have joined as members, and students are also joining as members. What do? We are going to be doing a lot of activities and which are more educational in nature. That is one side. We've already started activities around institutionalizing fellowships and scholarships for higher education in quantum. So this is on the education front. On the startup ecosystem, which needs a lot of support and help, what we started doing is interacting with people in the ecosystem like we're doing today. We've also had very detailed discussions with some of the funds where we've done educational calls where we've sort of given them a brief overview of what the quantum ecosystem looks like, and I've answered their questions in terms of what are the kind of short-term investments, long-term investments, what is it require, or what are the kind of areas that are most promising and things like that. In fact, we're also connecting to investors in other locations. The problem is not really the investor community, but it is good to have that, start having that conversation. But the real thing is that we need to have more incubators which are going to be supporting quantum related startups, and we want to create the right environment for doing that. The third area, so for that also, for that we are sort of working with some of the institutes, and we're trying to figure out a model of how that will happen. Just remember, we just started off towards the end of July. So I think given that fact, we've made a lot of progress, I think. The third area is the end user industry. So when you want to create a quantum solution, let's say for the financial sector or the chemical industry, manufacturing sector, or you want to use quantum sensors in various kinds of activities, you also need the end user industry to be ready for that. So I think that's the third area we are focusing on. Our plan is to kick off a very large scale open source based project for quantum solutions early next year. We actually introduced this topic in an international conference towards the end of November, actually towards the end of October, and we have a lot of people who are interested in it. This project will not just be national level, it will be global level. So we have banks and all, from the financial sector. We actually have a bank from Spain which is interested, and different kinds of entities from the healthcare sector in the US and so on and so forth getting interested, and we are also generating interest in India in that space. By the way, this is being enabled in a partnership with IEEE. So QATCI and IEEE have signed a memorandum of understanding for doing global collaborative projects. Yeah, so I think that's one of the areas that we are sort of looking at.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic background, and also partnership with government, with the partnership, etc. Before we move on, and you talked about some banks, etc., being applications. So let me cue it up with some few questions. So quantum computing is about computers. Now we all understand computers, and let's try to understand it a little bit more. So typically you use the notion of qubits. So you have the Google qubit, the Microsoft, and is it something like 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit? Is it a measure of computing capacity? Is that all, or is there something more about qubits?
So qubits are essentially different, right? So classical computing is dependent on classical phenomena at the physical abstraction layer, and some physical properties used as a measure of a bit, right? So it could be the charge on an electron, or you're measuring current, right? Voltage or current, and that gives you an idea of 0 or 1. That's what a qubit. That's what a bit is.
A binary encoding.
A binary bit is. But when you look at a qubit, we are using quantum phenomena, and if you're using semiconductor-based circuit and electron-based, the physical state of an electron, you could associate it with the spin of an electron, for example. So one of the spin directions for the electrons would be taken as 1, and the orthogonal one would be taken as 0. And the fact that at quantum scales, an electron could be spinning in any possible direction, all possible directions, and it collapses to a basis state, which is the 0 and 1, only when you measure it, implies that there is a third notional state, which is, it could be in any of the states. This is called in a state of superposition, right? So that's the difference between a qubit and a bit. A bit has very fixed states of 0 and 1 because it relies on classical phenomena. A qubit relies on quantum phenomena, and therefore it has what we have given it as a notional basis state of 0 and 1. And the real quantum behavior, which is, it exists in all possible states at the same time.
So
I just want to add one more statement there. Now, that possibility of being in all possible states at the same time actually gives us an advantage of parallelism. And computations can happen unless you measure them in an almost parallel way. And that's how the capacity of a qubit comes in, right? It's not in the same ratio as
it's a quantum search. So we'll come to that. So the notion of a hardware on which you are running it. So quantum phenomena has happened. So if it's normal hardware, we can get it, we can experiment. I doubt that's not possible with the quantum hardware. It's only available in very specialized places. So how could you get trained on the hardware and the language, the programming environment, the algorithms, the apps? Can you learn it in a simulation environment without having the hardware? What is the opportunities to be able to get started with quantum?
So there are several, as you rightly said, there are several hardware approaches that people have taken around the world to be able to create a scalable quantum computer. So you would have heard that, IBM recently announced a 127 qubit computer. So everybody is making progress and they're all focusing on different technology. Most of them have made their hardware available through the cloud, but it's expensive. For startups, I think there are special programs, especially Amazon has announced, Amazon is a QETCI member. They have announced a partnership with METI and have committed to make their platform available to startups, as in certain cases free, and in certain cases, you can talk to them to know more details, but they are definitely trying to help. The same is true for most of these vendors, whether it's Microsoft or IBM. There are a lot of options in, for availing their hardware, especially for startups. It is, they have a lot more facilities. And this hardware is accessible through the cloud. So you can do computations through the cloud, which actually get executed on the hardware.
Okay, so
that's one. But having said that, the hardware is expensive. So the expectation is that you will first run your programs on a simulator, which will be running on a classical computer, and then you will try it on the hardware. And so both are available, like the simulators. And a lot of people who were from the mainframe days, they sort of see the similarity between what used to happen with mainframes and now, because the hardware is scarce.
Yeah.
One more point I wanted to say was that all hardwares do not require 0° Kelvin. There are some approaches being tried which are at room temperature, including an approach which involves faults in diamonds, right? So using the electrons within the faults in diamonds to do these computations, etc., is one of the approaches. Then photonics based approaches are also based on room temperature. So just like you can use the spin of an electron as a measure of a basis state, you can also use the polarization of a photon as a measure of the basis state, right? And so that's another approach.
So I will explore that, and I noticed that IVK is putting some comments. I will come up to that, IVK, but keep going. See, one of the things to understand is, and from IoT perspective, we do semiconductor design. So people will be understanding, you have the circuit timing, you have gates, you do application, you do FPGA, field gate, programmable gate arrays, you do SoC, SOP. So we have a whole idea of how you design and engineer chips, but typically the basic approach is it's very application specific. Typically, in this type of scale, you don't have a general purpose computer or environment to design any silicon chip. It's a very application specific. You are doing a radio frequency application. You are doing a sensor. You're doing a polymer-based sensor translation to analog to digital sensor. You're doing sound music, so you have a digital analog conversion. So these are very application specific semiconductor programming, semiconductor design, chips, etc. And even the testing phase is there. So when we come to the quantum environment, my question or assumption is it also very application specific, or there are general purpose methods of going about doing any problem?
both is there, right? So for example, longer term aim is to have a general purpose quantum computer, right? And most of the software stacks or the programming languages that are being developed in a manner where they will eventually support that. But then there are also, the industry is also looking at where can you apply quantum now. So there is something called quantum annealing, which is being used. While some people use simulator, if you look at a company like D-Wave, they actually have quantum hardware annealers. And these are very application specific chips, which are, actually using quantum phenomena for solving a specific problem. So both approaches are there. And from a sensors perspective, I think a lot of the applications will continue to be very similar to, they will just, sort of merge with IoT, just in the sense that you'll just get higher precision sensors. And now you will design circuits in a manner where you're also taking into account the quantum part of the hardware. So in my opinion, quantum and classical will continue to be side by side for a long time, right? So in that sense, for each of these areas, the approaches might be slightly different, but we'll see both of these specialized circuits as well as an approach towards the general purpose computer.
Okay, so and this is discussed. The 2 or 3 application areas which are well defined. One is sensors, and you talked about being able to sense. The idea would be to be able to sense more minute, more precise, and more faster. The second area is in cryptography, where there's a lot of work, and there are 2 or 3 startups, QNU, etc., over there. And it's also in fintech, where I'll come back with other questions. And the third is large scale, if I may say, programming, dynamic programming solutions of the quantum search. Because you mentioned parallelism, it is not limited to L1, L2, and the polymer explosion of searching spaces for solution. Quantum can bypass that, and that's one of the things in metrology or optimization of traffic, etc. If you can formulate it in a way quantum solution and searches can do, it could be very fast. It can be 1,000. This is the same thing which happened with data warehouses. Normal SQL searches would take ages, and data warehousing searches could do it in 1,000th of a second, less time. So quantum could do that. But coming to cryptography, there are 2 parts of the thing. One is to use quantum cryptography, and you can, and that's true for military applications you can do. The second is the fear that quantum solutions can break existing in cryptography for payments, for blockchain, etc. What would be your reaction to that?
Yeah, so actually that's a very real risk. And in fact, most large organizations as well as governments are actually planning for that risk. The risk is that today, if you look at the most secure algorithm that is used for encryption almost everywhere, is RSA 2048, right? And literally from a classical standpoint, you're talking about a few billion years worth of computing to break that algorithm. But in quantum, you can break it in theoretically in a few seconds. It's just that today we do not have a quantum computer with as many qubits to be able to do that. The issue is that the bottleneck for a large scale quantum computer is error correction. So the day we solve the error correction problem, you will suddenly have the floodgates open, and actually RSA can be broken. So we have something called a term which is called quantum resistance. So what we need is algorithms which are quantum resistant. Now, at one point in time, people believed that RSA is breakable, but elliptic curve algorithms are not breakable. But then suddenly somebody figured out that there is a certain combination of algorithms on the quantum side which can break that too. Then we discovered that the hash function can also be broken, right? Now, then you think about the fact that blockchain, which is supposed to be a distributed model, also relies on existing
cryptographic proofs,
cryptographic mechanisms. So now Pandora's box can open up. Your network constitutes of we have intelligent networks, right? And these intelligent networks work on use encryption a lot for network security. So everything is going to become open at a point in time where scalable quantum computers are available. There's probably still some time. So a lot of planning is happening to first identify algorithms which we really believe are going to be quantum safe, right? The second is work on plans, which plans where you can actually substitute the existing algorithms with this new one. Now, the biggest fear for very sensitive data, like for example, military data, defense data, or even banking data, is that theoretically a bad player can today stream all your data, store it as it is passing over the network, and actually decrypt it later. Some of this data will have value 5 years from now, 10 years from now, even, right? So I think those are the kind of challenges that are there. I'm not trying to unduly alarm anybody, but there is a real need to be aware of this. There is also a very big opportunity here.
Correct.
Because all this work needs to be done. So imagine anybody who is investing, starting a startup in this space to solve any of these problems that I just spoke about. There is a ready-made market there because the transition is going to happen. It's already beginning to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There are some projects where I'm involved where this is a large issue, and the foundation of the work is JK, zero knowledge, smart proofs, and all that. So how could avoid this? But anyway, it's a fascinating complexity which will come in. But apart from the cryptographic thing, we talked about some other applications. Would you take an application, whether it is metrology or agriculture, crop production, or banking, which would be extremely useful for India at scale impact, very appropriate to the Indian economic, social, cultural situation, which you would like to talk a little bit about to get interest from people to look at innovating or joining that as a startup? Any specific challenge area where quantum approaches would make a big difference, which is appropriate to Indian environment?
Yeah, so I think, like you already said, security is one space which is going to be very high impact for India. Second is use of sensors. The third is actually in the biotech and the pharmaceutical industry. Because why? Because India already has a very strong base in this industry. Secondly, we have seen COVID, right? We've seen how much time, and for the first time, all the process of vaccination, etc., was accelerated big time, right? But we don't know what we will face in the future. Today, worldwide, there are around 18 very promising startups which are on quantum, trying to accelerate different aspects of the drug discovery process. Given India's strength in the biotech sector, I think it makes sense for the biotech sector and the quantum experts to pool resources together. And there should be some startups in this space which are focusing on various aspects of drug discovery to speed up that process. And I think that's one area. So plus there are other areas associated with this industry. For example, MRI imaging, today it is based on classical technology. Using quantum, actually it is possible to fast track that process or completely relook at how imaging happens, right? Using quantum sensors. So I think the medical equipment industry also has a great opportunity to invest in research in this space, have some international collaborations, and then start looking at and maybe let's work out an incubator in this space, getting the right players together, and then many startups should emerge in this space also, right? I mean, we are much more comfortable in India with hardware right now, right, as compared to what we used to be, let's say 15 years ago. So I think that's another area to look at.
Yeah. So if I may summarize, the areas which would make sense would be, of course, the cryptography issues, both in terms of preventive. You can use quantum to create quantum proof, and someone who is trying to read a sense, you will know, because the uncertainty principle comes into place. So you can know that it's gone through without surveillance. And the second is to make blockchain and other things more quantum resistant, and it's probably an evolutionary game. Armor, missile, more armor, more missile. But that's a game that we have to get in. So that's one area. The second, you talked about sensors, and I would like to come back about quantum sensors. And the third area would be in biotechnology, pharmaceutical, because COVID has shown that the DNA-based precision medicine is going to happen. COVID is a huge experiment. The 6 months you have done that. So that's here. Now coming to quantum sensors, what does that involve? If some startup or someone, so for example, volcanic organic VOC, volatile organic gases are tough. Pollution for air, etc. These sensors are very tough. They're not accurate. They're expensive. They do. So, is there any suggestions, ideas about startups in the IoT space who want to help develop quantum sensors in this area? Any ideas? Any suggestions?
So I think the precision and for the quantum sensors is higher. I'm not a sensor expert. Let me be very frank with you. But I can get you the right connects and the right people. If somebody is interested in this space, the right way I will enable it is to get the right people from across the world connected to you so that you can move ahead. But you have to be an expert in that area, at least in the sensors area. And I will do the right connects. But there is a lot of use in metro, in sensors from a metrology perspective also, like the time management, right? Now, when one thinks of time, you think of, okay, so where will you do time synchronization? Maybe, some usage might be there along with blockchain on satellite communication. That could be one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, not my favorite area, but, trading in banks.
Very much.
Right? Yeah, so because everything makes a difference, right? Till now, the banks would love it if you can break the time down to even finer granules, right? So something which was, so that's another way to, sort of look at it. But then also for meteorology, from weather predictions and stuff like that, because the accuracy of these sensors has been found to be higher and precision is better. So I think from that perspective, there is an opportunity here. There are also some guidelines, etc., which are internationally published. A lot of the literature on the advanced work that is happening, at least in the sensors area, is being published. For example, the US National Institute of Science and Technology actually has published reports on how they are using sensors, and it's something that we can just pick up and start looking at, right? And I think if we want, we can talk to US-India Business Council through them, get the NIST team, and we can have a conversation in more detail.
So for the audience, for the startups, and there's some questions, Ravi, we can comment that. For startups who have ideas about sensors, etc., we will work as a forum. Let's get this exploration started, etc. But I would switch it to Reena. For people who are not yet quantum, but are interested and willing to invest, what are the resources to start? So are there any journals, articles they should focus on, which are more application oriented? Are there any learning internships that they could go? Are there any institutions where they could go for a course? How do they go about building collaboration? And of course, they should consider joining QTCI will get more. But what would be the suggestions? What would be the enablers for them to get started on the journey?
So one of the things is to do any of the online, you can do free courses, but QETCI, we are starting these courses starting December. If you're a member, it's all free for you, right? And membership for individuals is very, very low. We just want people to be more involved. So that is one. The other thing is, if you're trying to try something at the software level, you can actually download any of the company stacks, like Microsoft or Amazon, excuse me, and start working on that. The tutorials are available online. Some of these sessions we'll be organizing as well.
Okay. And any international places, like for example, in Sensors Semiconductor, we tell them Fraunhofer, or you go here, you go there, these are the incubators. Any indicators on places where they could start talking to?
Yes, from a semiconductor perspective, the Semiconductor Industry Association and we are actually starting discussions for us to become partners in this space.
Okay.
I think we should do the same for IoT, because at the end of the day, it's all multidisciplinary.
Correct.
And the QETCI will bring in the quantum experts from here and from across. I'll give you a good example. There's a guy who wants to come back to India and wants to start some research work in the error correction space. Because of QETCI, we were able to connect him to somebody in Australia who's supposed to be a top-notch person in that space. Now, the two of them are working together. They, figured out that there is actually a joint bilateral program between India and Australia, and they can get funding through that program, right, for their research. So, I think people who are not in the quantum space starting to learn from scratch and trying to break all of these pieces is a very difficult thing, which is why we formulated this entity. The idea is you focus on your expertise and look at people like me and other people in the ecosystem. Like I think Iot Forum is there to help you for the IoT part, and we are there to sort of support you from the quantum perspective. In terms of online material, there is tons of material. You just search for quantum introduction videos and you will not know where to start. There are just too many of them. MIT edX has a lot of courses that you can take. Excuse me, I have a bad throat.
Yeah, no problem.
I traveled to Delhi and I forgot what the winter was like there. So anyways, so that's another thing. If you want to do more advanced study, you can actually do the MIT courses and get a certificate also, and sort of take it to the next level.
Just pick on Neeraj Bagi. You had a question. So I think my suggestion would be there are three parts to the quantum phenomena. One is the basics, supposition states and the half angle way of writing state 0, 1, and the mathematics and the logic. How do you add two states, etc. Those are basics which you can do in many of these courses. Trying to go more on that science, which is the science and then the cosmology, is probably a deep end. It's not very helpful. We need to move towards applications, and where if you take a reference stack, if you take one Amazon, Microsoft, IBM stack, and you take some application areas and do some programming courses, that may probably give you a much more operational understanding from which you can then figure out what to do. So that would be my suggestion. There are some issues on the lab, etc. So IVK, we will come back. Ravi, okay, time synchronization, weather prediction, yeah. So those are they're large application areas, and basically you need access to a lab. You need some ability to tinker in sensors and tinker with data to be able to simulate the optimization problem or the search problem for agriculture or for protein discovery or for wet labs, which is what biotechnology is all about. So what are the labs that would be available here? Is the government making some labs available? Would any of the institutions have a quantum lab that people can explore how to tap in?
Yeah, so right now, the government, CDAC and IIT Roorkee, they actually jointly released, and the Ministry of Electronics, they released a simulator, which works, which is an India-developed simulator platform, which can be used by people as well from an India perspective. Most of, like I said, you can get access to any of these platforms, simulators, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, IBM, and so on, right? Any of these trainings can be organized. We will be organizing these trainings starting January in more detail from each of these vendors. So what I will do is, at that point in time when these trainings are getting organized, I'll send a link to this group so that it can be circulated and whoever is interested can join. So I think that's one thing we can definitely do. The other thing is, I talked about this open source project. We are looking at a large number of people who are interested in creating end user solutions to become part of that project, because you will also get access to the end user industry through that process. Like, for example, let's say if you're trying to develop something for the chemical industry, or you're trying to develop sensors for something, chances are we'll have somebody from the manufacturing side or the chemical industry on our on that group as well. So instead of developing something in isolation, you develop something in open source format up to a certain level, you pick it up from there, make it proprietary beyond that. Perfect. That is what we are promising everyone. There's nothing hidden in this. But at the same time, because everybody is pooling resources together and applying their minds together, things will move faster, right? And there is an opportunity to learn from across the world. So that's the thinking.
So there are a lot of people with areas, agriculture, so I see a lot of questions, Ashok Mehta, and Santosh Nair, etc. So let me rephrase whether quantum can solve some problem into two parts. And Reena can correct me if I get it wrong. One is to be able to measure more precisely and at a much smaller time scales. And that matters for certain things like metrology or drug discovery at a much more granular scale you have to do. So quantum sensors, quantum sensing can do that. The second area, which is where the easy application area, the low-hanging fruits is searching through a large problem space where classical methods will take nonlinear times, and quantum searches can be amazingly fast because they operate. Superposition allows you to search a whole universe simultaneously in parallel. So a quantum search is a fantastic way to solve optimization problems, which are search problems. If you can convert a optimization problem in agriculture, in drug discovery, in metrology, to a search problem of large dimension, quantum searches can be very efficient. You will have to write the program, you will have to formulate it, but almost any application area where there is a large scale search of a solution as an optimization problem is very much a candidate for quantum computing. Reena?
Yeah. So wherever you have a need for finding the lowest minima of an equation, which is a very difficult problem mathematically to do, because you get it only to an approximation. The approximation becomes much better if you use quantum, right? And as Arvind mentioned, you will of course use search within it, but then also this whole concept of quantum annealing comes in very useful. Most of the hardware solutions that are based today are based on that. So traffic problems, logistics problems, anywhere where you need to optimize anything, I think it's a great way. There's one more area which is very close to what Arvind, you talked about in the beginning about natural processes. I think there's a very big opportunity in that space, because let's take the example of fertilizer production. If you look at the nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil, they effortlessly are able to do that process. But when we create chemical fertilizers, first of all, we create stuff which is harmful for the environment. Eventually, while it may be beneficial for the crop for the time being, the whole process of creating those fertilizers is a very energy intensive process, and a huge amount of energy is used in that. And nature does this effortlessly with very little energy. So if we can understand natural processes, then we can do more clean solutions, like sustainable solutions, and we can do it at lower energy costs. If we have the power of quantum computing with us, maybe we can understand how the human brain works. Today, nobody really understands that, right? Maybe if we have the power of quantum computers, and these are long-term wish list solutions, maybe we can design a space vehicle which can travel at faster speeds so that we can explore the universe, right? But some of the most difficult problems on this planet, which are considered to be non-solvable today, they can be solved if we have quantum computers.
Very true, because it's a lever. It enables you to compute a different space. For those of who are interested, I talked in the early morning. So the Siberian crane, for example, the theory is that it has certain isotopes of an unusual notion, water in its beak. So magnetic flux computes into the blue ray. So it sees very shades of blue as it looks forward, and that's how it sees magnetic flux. And this has been tested empirically. How it actually happens is different. And lots of animals' senses are around quantum states, and that's part of the sensors we can use. I think we're running out of time. I will try to take one question which IVK has put. I really don't know how to go about answering it. What is the overlap in neuroeconomic models, emotional, social, computational brains, and quantum computing, which relates to other way of saying that quantum computing will let us understand brains. The model of the brain right now is emotional, which is the Iot theory and all that, social, which is cultural norms and computation. We process signals and all that. Does quantum give a different way of thinking about it? Maybe that's what is asking you. Any reactions there?
I think the first part of how the brain functions is about how do neurons function and at the energy levels that they do. And then how does problem solving happen in the human brain, right? And how does the subconscious and the conscious processing correlate with each other? I think those are the two main problems. Once they are solved, I think the emotional and the social context have more than just computational problems. We have other sciences that come into the picture, right? So I hopefully, and this is an extrapolation, so just bear with me. The extrapolation is that if you solve the computational problem and you have a fairly good model of the physical brain and in terms of how it operates as a machine, I think then the other sciences can be applied to infer other things, right? And there's also this what many people call pseudoscience of how people are linking the quantum, and I'm saying many people, and I'm not really commenting on what I think, but how this quantum effects at the brain could be resulting in consciousness and all that. That's open to discussion, actually. And while some people call it pseudoscience, Harvard actually has a group that is focusing on this. Right?
No, I am in the group which feels that consciousness is related to quantum phenomena, and it
Yes.
goes beyond propositional calculus, which is the basis of a lot of reasoning that we use. But I don't think we can go there yet. I think we are close to our time. I would like to thank all the audience and some of the questions, answers you have. Thank Rita for the connect and look forward to establishing connections. For those of you who want to explore this forward, you can use our Telegram chat and put us some questions. We will keep the conversation going, and as QETCI develops more, the labs and training and internship, and I would encourage you to go look at their website. They're early stage, but that's the place to join in. Quantum is a very young field with Fertilizer thing. So please go ahead and get involved and look forward to getting this journey going. Thanks, Reena. Thanks, everyone. Back to Win, you are there? Or
thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here, Arvindji.
Yeah. I think Telegram handle. Win, can you put down the Telegram place where they can join?
Yes, we've shared it. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, Anand sir.
Yeah, so thank you, Arvind and Reena, for an exciting introduction to a whole world of new opportunities, and hopefully it will lead to a better world for future generations. I think that is the key question today for almost everybody, because the usage of technology to rapidly erode the to sustain the world is a key question for most people. So hopefully some of the things that were mentioned today will help to, if not, augment, at least maintain the world in terms of the balance between nature and human beings as it is today. But I think it's an exciting place for a lot of young at heart entrepreneurs, if you want to work in this new space. And I think we'll certainly take up the opportunity for Iot Forum to work with QETCI in a more formal way. Som is introduced to us. He did excuse himself. He's got a conflict, so he couldn't attend this today. That's what he was saying. But on behalf of all of us here at the Iot Forum, I would like to thank you for making the time today. And thank you, Arvindji. As usual, I think we're going to raise the bar in the Iot Forum in terms of challenging the next innovation and the next innovation area. So with that, thanks to all of you today. I hope you enjoyed the introductory discussion. Please do look forward to more such deeper discussions and more